Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the daily edition of today's newspaper, extract the important articles for discussion, and also look at some of the PIB articles relevant for your prelims examination. And in one of the PIB articles, we also take a look at the brief background of that aspect. So, today in total, we are going to have a discussion of around 10 different topics. So, starting first of all with the editorial discussion, Reconnect Public Health with People's Needs is an editorial piece which talks about that how the governmental initiatives of Ayushman Bharat wellness programs, etc., they have shifted the focus away from healthcare into something which is known as wellness, and wellness can be very abstract. So we are going to have a discussion regarding this in GS paper 2 and GS paper 3. That is where it is relevant. And we are also going to talk about beyond the article, that what is given in the article. First we will discuss about that, then we will have a discussion regarding the approach required for UPSC in this. India's next challenge from invention to global scale is a very thought provoking article. Now, it talks about that how just new innovation is never sufficient. You do need to have a global mindset and a scale to produce at a global level. Only then will you be able to bring about a massive change. This brings great relevance for your GS paper 3, even for your essay paper, by the way. So that is also where it will be very relevant. Then, center tightens norms for FCRA. Now, we have been discussing this previously as well for the past week and a half, that FCRA norms are going to be changed. So, the new norms have been declared. Now, this has appeared as a news article in page one. So, for those of you appearing for the examination of prelims or mains, the changes can be relevant. UPSC is known to ask these questions directly in the mains examination as well, that what are the new changes of the FCRA norms, or it can be reframed in a prelims multiple choice question. So we are going to have a point wise understanding and summarization of what are the new changes. This is relevant for your GS paper too. Evident distress is again an editorial piece talking about. Now, yesterday we had discussed about the output of the core industries, that how, other than electricity, cement, and steel, majority of the sectors experienced a contraction. So that is what the article talks about, that there is an evident distress in the economy, and we need to catch that indicator and go for a structural reform relevant for your GS paper 3. India's patchy industrial climate strategy deals with the topic of our own, the perform achieve trade, as well as the carbon credit scheme, about the aim to reduce the carbon emissions and how our overall effort is quite patchy and is not uniform, and that is why the end result will not be very impactful. So what we will do is, even though it is not explained in the article in detail, for those of us who are unaware about the basics, we will talk about what is this perform achieve trade, right, and why is it that it is important to reform the way in which we take a look at our industrial emissions. So these are some of the articles that we are going to discuss. Let's start with the first article, but before that, all of you starting from the basics, or all of you even revising and appearing for the UPSC next year, it is very important not only for your geography but also for the portion of your international relations to have some confidence in maps. So, we have started this initiative of talking about the basics of geography. That is, what do we understand by glacial erosion? What do we understand by the case of uplifted plateau, sedimentary plateau, and so on? But we do that with the help of the maps, with the help of the free sessions. So, free sessions will be held on our app on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And the timing is 6 p.m. You can scan the QR code and you can always attend the session. So, do attend the 1 hour, 1.5 hour session and get an idea about geography basics, the world geography, and then Indian geography as well. Now, we have come up with the Shiksha Mahotsav triple treat for all of you preparing for the examination. And thinking about having a goal and having a sure shot attempt next year or year after that. We have come up with the lucrative offer whereby if you have 6 months, the 6 months free subscription is provided to you at 16,999. 9 months, 9-month free subscription. Along with that, the 9-month assured program is also being provided. So there are various different benefits which are available to you. Do use this opportunity, and right now is the time that you begin your preparation. It is high time that you begin the preparation for next year or year after that. So use the code IS English and ensure that the maximum possible discount available on the day is availed by you. Now we start with the first article of the day: Reconnect Public Health with People's Needs. This is an article relevant for your GS paper 3 as well as GS paper 2. Now, what does this article tell us about? First of all, let me give you a broader context so that you are also able to understand this background. And then after that, you are able to, we will summarize this discussion. So, the article tells us that look, when it comes to health parameters, we as a country need to improve. Now, within those health parameters, there are various different aspects such as maternal mortality, infant mortality, etc. Now, as a nation, as a society, as a government, we need to target those health parameters. But the article argues that overall, the government's entire attention has shifted to wellness. And that is where the public primary healthcare centers, etc., they are being rebranded as the wellness centers. And that is shifting the goalpost, basically because wellness is a very subjective term. Wellness gets to do with the mental well-being, with the social well-being, with the physical well-being as well. And the article has a staunch argument. You can agree or disagree with that, that should not count, but rather it is the health indices and the health parameters which should count. It also talks about some of the schemes of the government where, for example, you have the Ayushman Bharat, the digital mission, where digitization of the records is being done. The article has the argument that that is not the problem with the health services that we have. The problem with our health services is lack of infrastructure. So we should solve that rather than going for the digital mission. So that is what the article talks about. So we will take a look at what is it that the article is expressing, and then we will have a discussion that what is the real issue with our healthcare sector and what should be done in order to improve that. We will have a kind of a critical analysis. So, in today's day and age where universal healthcare, providing basic healthcare to everyone is the norm, it is the role of the government as a welfare state, the central and the state governments as well, in order to provide as much amount of help to the citizenry in availing that healthcare. Right? So, India's public health policy has increasingly shifted from addressing population level health needs towards promoting individual wellness and digital health initiatives. Right? Now, you would have seen this that basically when we are talking about promotion of yoga, yoga is a kind of a wellness. It improves your way of life. It improves your overall health parameters, does not cure you immediately of any particular diseases, that can be argued, but rather than that, it promotes wellness. When we talk about, let's suppose, Khelo India, now that is also a campaign which is aimed at promoting wellness. So that is what it is saying, that the overall policy initiative seems to be changing from population level health needs. What are population level health needs? For example, stunting, wasting, infant mortality, maternal mortality, the case of the diseases that people suffer from. So, from that, the attention is shifting, and it is shifting to wellness and digital health initiatives. And that risks weakening of the core objective of public health, that is, ensuring equitable access to essential healthcare services. Now, here It talks about the fact that the goals and the goalposts set by the government has been changing. Earlier, you had the primary healthcare centers, the secondary healthcare centers, all of them were basically targeting the improved delivery of healthcare services to the population. But now that has been changing. So you have the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, which was started and introduced in 2018. And the prime purpose was to strengthen the primary healthcare infrastructure. Primary healthcare centers are the first point of contact for any person living in the rural areas, in the small talukas, in the blocks. Primary healthcare center is the first point of contact of that individual to the healthcare professional. So that was the purpose, to improve that primary healthcare center network across the country, now intended to expand preventive, promotive, curative, rehabilitative, and palliative care services. Over a period of time, this has changed, where existing healthcare centers are being rebranded as wellness centers. Okay, so that is what the argument has been, that look, when you have to improve the condition of the primary healthcare center, what do you need to do? You need to improve the infrastructure, improve the infra, right? Then after that, you basically need to have more practitioners, right? You need to provide cheap medicines, cheap diagnostics and medicines, right? Now, these are some of the things which basically more hospital beds, that comes into the part of improving the infra. The doctor to patient ratio needs to be improved. Doctor to patient ratio. Now, basically, as per the WHO recommendation, the doctor to patient ratio should be how much? Somewhere around 1 is to 800 at max. That one doctor every 800 population. In many areas of our country, for example, in the eastern and the northeastern part of Bihar, in some parts of Odisha, in certain districts, that ratio is a whopping 1 is to 52,000, which tells you that for 52,000 or 40,000 population, you have only one doctor. So that is the case of under delivery of the services. So this is what the article's argument is, that look, rather than promoting or improving the condition of the of the primary healthcare centers, you have rebranded them, and that does not solve the problem that is being faced. Then you have Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. Now, under this, the objective to create digital health ecosystem, provide every citizen with Ayushman Bharat health account, the ABHA IDs, and maintain registries of the patients, health facilities, and healthcare professionals. Here, the argument painted by the article is that this is not even the problem that our healthcare system faces. What you are putting in a lot of money and effort in is futile. And that is where we need to again come back to the population based healthcare approach, because wellness, and there is a kind of an evolutionary description provided about what wellness is. And the concept of wellness, which has evolved through the 1900s, initially talked about physical well being, then covered the emotional and the mental aspect of wellness. And that eventually is something which is ever so dynamic. So, wellness for you can be very different from my wellness. And when do we say that wellness is achieved in an area? So, that is basically the argument that all these are futile. Don't care or don't shift the focus on wellness, shift on the population based healthcare strategy. So, that is the debate. Now, on which side of the debate you lie upon, do let me know in the comment section below whether wellness should be prioritized or health should be prioritized. Now, here, let us have a kind of a discussion here. When we talk about health, now, health is something which is based upon certain parameters, right? For example, a simple that is what the article argues, a simple description of, let's suppose, your BP levels, your sugar levels, etc., your hormonal levels, that will determine your health. But wellness is very subjective. That is physical, mental, right, social, emotional, everything. Now there are two sides of the argument. For every issue there are two sides of the argument. One side of the argument is that, look, we have so many people suffering from various issues and diseases, we don't have the luxury to think about wellness. That is one side of the argument. That is what the article vociferously argues about. But there is other side of the argument as well. You would also have come across multiple articles over the past year and a half which talks about that how India as a country is not very happy in terms of the gross happiness index, etc. We lie pretty much at the fag end of the spectrum. When we talk about countries like Bhutan, they measure that happiness index. In our country, that is lacking. We also have to understand the fact that many of the times the physical well-being of an individual, the body or the human body, is not just an assimilation of organs. It is basically a well functioning organization driven by the brain. Now, unless and until mental wellness is achieved, unless and until the physical wellness is achieved, you cannot, under any circumstance, gain the health parameters that you desire for. For example, many of the diseases, from the case of hypertension, and the latest National Family Health Survey number 6 data does tell us that in India, the rise of hypertension, the diabetes, these problems, they are the major issue now for our country. Our country is not that where you have famine related deaths now. We have surpassed that stage. So we have these lifestyle diseases. Now, stress is a major driver of these particular diseases that we face, from obesity to hormonal disorders to even the case of hypertension, diabetes. Now, when we talk about initiatives such as, let's suppose, how to ensure physical activities on a daily basis, now that ensures long term wellness. After all, prevention is always going to be better than cure under any circumstance. Prevention is better than cure. If you ensure a better lifestyle today, you will be fitter tomorrow, rather than only thinking about the doctor when some parameter goes wrong. You will always be chasing your health parameters. Okay, so that is why it is a bit naive to say that wellness should be ignored and only the absolute population based health metric should be approached. While population based health metric is also very important, but wellness on the other side is also very relevant. You guys are the prime examples, and you guys would have experienced it on your own. When it comes to the exam time, the stress level that you guys face, that is something that nobody else can experience, nobody else can share. Now, at that point of time, when you are facing that stress, you will find that some or the other physical ailments also accompany with that, isn't it? Now, if somebody comes to you and with a stethoscope and tells you that no, your heart rate is normal, your the blood sugar is normal, so you are fit, so study for 12 hours, you will fall sick today or tomorrow. It is inevitable fact. So that is why wellness cannot be ignored, but on the same hand, the health parameters can also not be ignored. So let's move beyond the article, because health is an important aspect which is relevant, which is asked in the examination. So what are the issues when it comes to healthcare sector in our country? We have discussed that infrastructure, the case of the lack of enough medical practitioners, not enough paramedical staff, costly private healthcare services, government healthcare services are oftentimes inadequate. These are some of the issues that we have already discussed. What is the solution and the way forward? After all, that is what we have to work for. What is the way forward in this? The first thing that we have to work upon is an improvement in the infrastructure. And that is where infra investment has to happen. Is it something which has to happen only from the central government? No. So here basically both center and the states go to any particular aims. Earlier you had only one aims, now you have many aims. Go to any of those. You will find an overburdened healthcare system where you have endless amount of lines because that is affordable healthcare in those areas. And that is where the larger population lies in and relies upon. So there the timely delivery of healthcare services is a must. Then the deployment of practitioners. Deployment of practitioners. Now, this has to be incentivized. For example, when we talk about all the people who get the doctoral degree, how many of them are very ready to serve in districts like, uh, let's suppose, Purnia or a Farbisganj in Bihar, or a region like Bolangir, Koraput in Odisha? How many of them are eager to serve in the rural hinterlands of Bastar? Right. So that is very minuscule. Majority of them will try to find a job in a Delhi or a Mumbai. So that is where the deployment of practitioners is an issue for us. And this is where we basically need to have the incentive program. Incentive program. Okay. Give them easier access to the postdoctoral research. After all, in the medical community, it is also said that once you get a kind of an exposure to the rural hinterlands, then your overall service delivery improves, your diagnostic ability improves, and you become a better doctor. So, those people who have served in those hinterlands, provide them with an incentive program. Then, mandatory attendance of the doctors is also a must. Because in many of the cases, primary healthcare centers, you will find that the doctors are deployed. But rather than going to the primary healthcare centers, they find it financially lucrative to open their own clinics. So the doctor won't be available at the healthcare center, but will charge a dubious amount of fee at their own clinics. Isn't it? Then, other than that, we also need to promote the digital infra. Now, this is where I feel that the argument presented in the article that digital infra is not required, that argument is flawed. Why do I say so? Because unless and until you have the medical records in a digital medium. So, for example, let's suppose a poor person who is, let's suppose, in hinterlands of Bihar. Now, that person is a migrant laborer. That person moves to Karnataka, Bengaluru, and that person again falls ill. Now, when that person falls ill, you never know whether it is a recurrence of an existing disease or not. And in that particular case, if that person is hospitalized, won't it be better for that individual's health if there is a digital record which can be accessed in Bengaluru or a Mysuru as well? Or should that person still carry the burden of those documents wherever that person goes in life? So that is why digital infra is a must. For example, take a look at the countries like US. Each and every conversation between the doctor to the patient is documented. Every place, everywhere. So that you have a streamlined understanding of what kind of medicines are also prescribed. What kind of medicines. Now, in an era where every day we are arguing about antimicrobial resistance developed due to the drugs which are being taken by the population, a digital record about what kind of antibiotics that person has consumed, which medical practitioners are always prescribing antibiotics even for a normal cough and cold. That would go a long way. Unless and until you have the digital mapping of the entire healthcare center, you will never understand where the gaps are present, because health Sadly and unfortunately, in our country, that still operates in silos. And this is where we need the solution. Then, the promotion of the startup ecosystem is also important for affordable healthcare. And by the way, this is the data of the number of startups. I don't know how many of us are aware about it. That when we talk about the number of startups, maximum proportion of startups are in which industry? Software industry. After that, the maximum number of startups are in healthcare and wellness sector, around 17% of our overall startups. So that tells you that there is a movement which is happening there, but it needs to move into the direction of affordable healthcare. Right now, most of them are in the area of nutritional guidance, right? So affordable healthcare needs to be prioritized. Then affordable delivery of drugs, affordable drugs, that also needs to be provided. So these are some of the issues which or some of the solutions which can be provided. Other than that, when we say wellness, wellness has got its own role. Wellness has got its role in terms of the palliative care, even in terms of the non communicable diseases, the lifestyle diseases that we suffer from. There also, wellness comes into the picture. Okay, so do let me know on which side of the argument you lie upon, whether the concentration on wellness is good or is it bad. Do let me know in the comment section. Now, this is a very thought provoking article talking by Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, one of the entrepreneurs in our country, chairperson of Biocon. India's next challenge from invention to global scale. Now, what is this article about? This article, guys, is very simple. Oftentimes in our daily discussions, oftentimes in our deliberations, we rue the fact or we basically express sadness on the fact that major inventions don't originate from India, isn't it? We are not the leading innovators. China is an innovator, US is an innovator, Japan is an innovator. We are not. The article argues that just invention and innovation is never the key to success. The key to success is manufacturing and ability to produce it at a massive global scale. And it has given examples. What are the examples? Now, right now, the entire world is focusing on semiconductors. Now, India had started the semiconductor movement way back in the 1970s, realizing the importance of semiconductor. At that point of time in the 1970s itself, you had the Semiconductor Complex Limited, which was established. And we had the opportunity and we had the, in a way, the lead across the globe in manufacturing the most cutting edge semiconductor out there in the world. And that was done by the Semiconductor Complex Limited way back in the 1970s itself. Over a long period of time, in around the region of Chandigarh is where it was set up. This plant was where you had the scientists working at the same level that you have ISRO, etc. So same level of academic proficiency was expected at this semiconductor plant. But then the problem was that it never got the amount of investment which was required. And it was very inward looking, right? Only focusing upon what kind of innovation can we do. It is a different matter that the ending to this Semiconductor Complex Limited was very sad. You had such a massive fire which completely destroyed the entire setup. And it is our misfortune that along with that, we let that knowledge also die. And then when we have the TSMCs of Taiwan, etc., the Foxcons of the world, the TSMCs, all of them, they are basically turning out to be billion-dollar enterprises. We are left chasing the pack. Then, another example, Electronic Corporation of India Limited, ECIL. In the 1960s, and the at that point of time, India did suffer or did experience multiple wars. Now, India did experience some sanctions also. At that point of time, ECIL started developing the system or the personal computers, the case of the electronic devices. These were developed. But again, do we know the name ECIL for computer manufacturing? No. When somebody tells you personal computers, the PCs, etc., your mind will go to an IBM or rather an HP for that matter. And those are the kind of systems that you think about. So, where did that innovation go? We did invent at the right time in this case. Then, as late as 1998, you had the case of the Simputer, which was developed by some of the leading scientists in our country, thinking about what the modern day and the future of computing would look like. They started developing the concepts like a tablet, that modern day computing won't require a large personal computer, but it would come to a tablet. Now, again, that innovation was lost. And you had Steve Jobs on a podium launching the case of the iPhone and the iPod, and that dominating the entire global electronics market. The concept of the computer was lost. So, in all these cases, it highlights a systemic issue, and that is the issue that we must understand and address. So, what is that issue? The issue is, first of all, do we lack that innovation? No. But then, do we reward that innovation enough? The answer is still no. For example, today, let's suppose three of you have an idea about a robotics company which will solve warehousing issues and solve the labor shortage problem in multiple warehouse, where let's suppose you have an idea that a robot can automatically adjust the delivery systems and the placement of materials in a warehouse. You start a company, you go around seeking funds across the country. Everybody is going to ask you the same question: is there an existing model like this in US or China? The moment you say no, it is the first of its kind, then they will start casting aspersions that it can't be implemented. The moment you say it is already there in US, that is the model we are trying to copy, you will get that funding. So the venture capitalist funding for new innovations in our country, that is extremely low. You will be able to raise millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in US, in Singapore, but not in India. So that risk taking capital in our country is very low. Risk taking capital, right, is low. And this basically is the issue with venture capitalist VCs, the hedge funds, and so on. And there is an economic study around it also. It gets to deal with that when you are at a certain per capita income, the risk taking appetite in general is low. But right now, many countries of a comparative economic scale have greater availability of this risk taking capital. Then, manufacturing is ignored. Manufacturing is ignored. Then, after that, inward looking programs. What do we mean by that? Inward looking programs. We basically concentrate on those kind of programs that only justify our own goals and requirements. We don't focus on those programs which will solve the global issues, the global problems. And we have to think global. We are so, even the government research agencies, they are so very much occupied by fulfilling their targets of this much requirement that you cannot think about at a larger scale. So, global issues are ignored. Okay. Now, if we solve these bottlenecks, starting from funding, there is also the issue of lack of private participation. You also have the issue of low investment in R&D, in research and development. That is also an issue. So we spend only around 0.7 to 0.8% of our GDP in R&D. We need to be spending more than that. Unless and until we do that, till that point of time, we will still be chasing. Right. So for various different programs, you will see that we are still chasing the world. But India also has got success stories. What are the success stories? First is the pharma industry. Now, pharma industry is a success story. India is known as the pharmacy of the world. Why? Is it because India is able to manufacture the cutting edge drugs? No. Is it because India is able to manufacture the best quality drugs? Maybe not. It is because we are able to manufacture at scale, the largest production. So that scale issue has been solved here. Then, when we talk about supercomputing, now here we developed our own supercomputer. Now, this was based on certain compulsions, but after this, we are not dependent on anyone about it. Digital public infrastructure that we have, right? The India Stack story, what is also known as the India Stack. Now, in that India Stack story, you have the case of the UPI, the Aadhaar, right? Then you have the accounts, Jandhan accounts. So, this is one of the largest public digital infrastructure created anywhere across the world. In fact, the digital financing system that we have, you go to many countries in the world, you will find that India is much more efficient in terms of the payment infrastructure, in terms of the payment which can be done, and it is much more inclusive as well. So, there are these success stories which have been deployed at a larger scale. But then, going ahead into the future, the next 50 to 70 years, that is the entire 21st century, is going to be determined by the progress in AI, the progress in quantum computing, and the progress in space tech. Now, in AI, we are already slightly behind the race, right? Behind the global leaders. But then, AI has got a greater use which is going to come up in the next few years. Right now, everybody is so much indulged in the new generation of AI, that this is what the AI can do, that is what the AI can do. The real game will start in the implementation of AI, implementation and deployment of AI. And this is where India has a lot to gain, because we have the largest population case where we can deploy it in agricultural sector, in healthcare sector, in education sector, and we can take a look at excuse me, we can take a look at the tangible benefits thereafter. So that is basically again where, and when we talk about the deep seek, right? Now deep seek has told us, or has taught us what? That just the mere development of a new AI tool is not going to solve anything. It is the large scale deployment. How do you use that AI engine? That is going to be the game changer. So, there, India has got a lot to provide. And then quantum computing, quantum computing from satellite communication to the defense tech to the missile seekers to the communication systems, everything is going to come to the quantum computing. And again, this is where we have to focus upon, and we have to increase the implementation. Now, China has already started taking leapfrogs of advantage in quantum computing. We also have to do our own bit so that we are not left behind decades like in the semiconductor race. Space tech. Now, we have quite a frugal and innovative space tech. For example, Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan, at a budget that what it did was something which was incomparable, right? But rather than sitting on those laurels that we make the cheapest spacecrafts, we have to think larger. That is where you have the even the Gaganyaan mission, the case of the Bharatiya Antariksh Station. These are of the larger scale solutions that we are thinking about. But we also have to ensure a greater mass public and the private participation in these areas so that the outcome is quite tangible and the outcome is beneficial for the larger citizenry. Yes, correct. The DeepSeek LLM model. Now, what is the way forward for us? Building innovation ecosystem. How will you build innovation ecosystem? Reward the innovators, right? Innovators who come up with a new innovation, not just copying a model from US or a Korea or a China. That should be rewarded. That is not the case in our country. Strengthening venture capital availability. This has to involve the private capital, right? Private participation has to be there. Then supporting startups and manufacturing, particularly in space tech. You have various different startups which are coming up in defense tech. You have various different startups which are coming up. These will basically solve the long-term issues that India is facing regarding R&D, etc. So this is very important. Now, one of the major disconnects that we have is the gap between institute to industry. For example, many of you who are doing your jobs. Now, what you have learned in your college, how much of that is implementable in your office? Almost negligible, right? So, what you study in your colleges, that is not at all relevant in jobs. So that industry to institute connect is required. The industry needs to guide those institutes that, look, I don't need everyone to be trained in a certain manner. Give me certain very skilled, let's suppose electricians with a low skill level also, that is also required. That is also fine for me. So vocational training, to the case of large scale manufacturing problems, all of that can be solved from this. Scholarship programs, encouraging global market access. That is, the new companies, when they want to basically export, so they should basically be promoted, provided with some credit incentive by the state and the center, and developing robust supply chains. Not the case of the semiconductor complex. One company caught fire, one center caught fire, the entire semiconductor program was halted. So, robust supply chain. Every part of the country should be participating in that. That is when long term job development will happen. Your per capita income will improve. You will have the virtuous cycle rolling in the economy, and that will have long term benefits, even in terms of availability of funds. Okay. Now, innovation needs the helping hand of scale to bring mass revolution. Elaborate in the context of India's technological challenges. So, here, for example, how do you write the answer? So, in the intro, what do you write? There are different ways in which you can introduce the answer. One of the way is you target one of the keyword, that is innovation. Other way is where you start with the requirement of India in the modern era. So, ideally, you start with that innovation is the key to keep track of the changing technological paradigm, and in order to ensure that the nation or the society is at the cutting edge of the technological forefront, like that you can also introduce India moving into the 21st century as it aims for Viksit Bharat 2047. At that point of time, it is very important for us to focus upon innovation. But innovation alone won't suffice. And then in the body, you give the examples of how innovation oftentimes does not suffice. You give the example of ECIL, the SCL, all these, the Simputer, these examples you provide. Okay. So when you provide with those examples, then after that, the need for scale. What is the need for scale? You basically produce for the world, you will solve global issues, you will be able to have a better technological edge, you will have the best of the talents, and then the overall development in R&D, infra, the government, etc. Everything can happen, right? After this, once you have dealt with the innovation aspect, the scale aspect, then in the later part of the body, talk about the mass revolution. What is the mass revolution in this case? The upliftment of the lives of the general population. So, if you want to bring about a real change in the per capita income, in the availability of jobs, for that, you do need these innovators meeting the global demand and thereby generating real income for the country. And then, in the conclusion, again, mix it up with the Viksit Bharat or program. Then we have the evident distress. Now, this is about the growth of the core sector industries. Stress in West Asia crisis has revealed economic pain. Now, basically, yesterday we discussed about the core sector industries. We had discussed that of the eight different industries, only steel, cement, and electricity has shown positive growth. Coal, crude oil, natural gas, petroleum refinery products, fertilizers, all of them have indicated a massive decline. Now, it is something that can be impacted by the West Asia crisis, isn't it? But then, many of the indicators tell us that it is not only dependent on West Asia crisis. For example, one of the indicator that we talked about yesterday as well is the case of the coal. The coal production has decreased by 9.3%. Now, a decline in the mining sector is never good for the income levels of the casual laborers. So that is why this decline, why it has happened, that needs to be understood in greater detail and ensured that this is not something which becomes cyclical as a process. Now, when we talk about crude oil production, natural gas production, this crude oil production and natural gas production, this is talking about our domestic production, isn't it? We have the oil and the gas fields in our country as well. Now, yes, our the crude oil that we have, the natural gas that we have, they are not of the best quality. But we do have oil and gas fields, Ankleshwar in Gujarat, Digboy and the Jorhat region in Assam, the Bombay High region. Now, there we need to be able to produce more. And particularly at the time of crisis, when a country like India does not have enough strategic petroleum reserves, we need to be able to produce a lot more. So, why is that production slacking? That indicates again an issue which needs to be looked upon, and it is indicating a kind of an economic slowdown, right? Now, petroleum refinery production, it is understandable because the crude oil import is getting impacted, so refinery production is getting impacted. But as we move into an El Nino year, where the agricultural crisis will or is expected, fertilizer demand will increase, right? So, in that case, fertilizer production has actually declined. So, that is never good. Fertilizer production should be higher. So, these are some of the issues. Now, take a look at, we have talked about it multiple times previously as well. When we take the case of China, now China also does not have lot of natural oil and gas, right? So, fertilizer is something which is produced from natural gas. So, what has China done? China has, in the past 7 to 8 years, gone for a massive deployment of coal gas gasification, right? Or the syngas, coal gasification, and the production of syngas, synthetic gas. Now, we have been talking about this for the past 6 to 7 years. Now, the ministry is organizing road shows, etc. There is some movement there. But as soon as the energy crisis in West Asia will be solved, again we will take a relaxed step. So that is where we need to put our feet to the pedal and we need to accelerate upon this so that at least 5 years down the line, we are self sufficient in terms of urea production, in terms of fertilizer production. So that is basically why it is a cause of concern that your various different economic indicators are not doing very well. Even when we talk about GST, Now, GST collections have been lower. For example, domestic GST collections or the revenues declined 2.6% in May, while average growth over the past 6 months has only been 3.1%. That means, what is this indicating? Reduction in domestic demand, right? In domestic demand. Now, why is there a reduction in domestic demand? That is primarily because you have the oil crisis. Oil crisis has led to inflation, isn't it? It has led to inflation. So, as a consequence, purchasing power has reduced. Purchasing power has reduced. So, that is going to have an overall impact. So, that is also the case basically when the demand side or the demand overall reduces, the supply side will get impacted. Once the supply side gets impacted, that is when massive job losses start to happen. So we have to prevent that. Simple terms. For example, if let's suppose today I'm not able to buy an air conditioner, that means the air conditioner company will have a reduced demand, right? So the number of people that it was hiring to produce air conditioners, it will reduce those number of people. It will fire some of them. Now they won't have income. So they won't be able to buy anything. So overall economy takes a hit. So that is what where we have to take a cue, and we have to go for certain more structural reforms, and we have to ensure every sector of the economy keeps on contributing. Now, the center tightens norms for foreign contributions, the FCRA norms for NGOs, etc. Now, this was earlier discussed in a previous editorial section, which talked about that how NGOs now have got a lot of restrictions in our country. They cannot operate, they can be suspended, their activity can be suspended, their infra and the assets can immediately be frozen, and how it is a violation of the fundamental rights in certain cases from 25 to even 30. So that is the case of the new FCRA regulations. For your exam, what is required to understand what the new regulations are, right? Through and through. That is relevant both for your prelims, both as well as for your mains examination. This is going to be relevant. So the union government has amended the foreign contribution rules 2010. Why has the union government done it? The side of the or the argument of the union government, first of all, to get a greater accountability of what these NGOs are doing, whether they are getting funded, they are getting the funds from reliable agencies, or they are basically misutilizing their position. So here, what are the changes which has been done? Mandatory categorization of activities has been done. So NGOs can now operate overall in these five sectors, the FCRA norms. Basically, all NGOs are required to disclose activities, and that is what they do, and where do they carry out those activities. It should not be the case that they say we operate in Karnataka and they start operating in Maharashtra. That cannot be the case. So which portion or what are the activities and what is the geographical area, geographical scope of their programs, and contributions under five permitted categories. Which are the permitted categories? Educational category, economic, religious, social, cultural. Now, even within this is not an open ended. Even within this, there is a sub classification, right? That the fund should be given for which area under education, right? So, specific school, college, or library, scholarship, research institutions, and think tanks. For that, you can have the foreign contribution, civic awareness, or the constitutional rights program, like livelihood generation, skill development, agriculture, entrepreneurship and micro enterprises, financial and digital inclusion. Like that, it has been subcategorized under the area under which you can basically get these foreign contributions. Okay? Places of worship, religious education, that is, these are your portions which are relevant for your prelims. Okay, all those appearing for your prelims next year, please keep in mind what are these categories and subcategories. Okay, there is also a mandatory disclosure which is required. NGOs have to disclose what are the activities that they undertake, the geographical areas of operation, as we have discussed, websites and all their social media accounts, publications and communications material. In any of the case, if they are found to be in violation of their disclosure, then seizure of assets can happen, renewal of registration can be withheld, and the NGOs, their functionality can be curtailed. So that is to, the government is saying, to ensure greater public scrutiny and traceability of where these foreign funds are coming from. Because we have discussed this previously as well, that there is a suspicion that the foreign funds are coming in for diverting some of these NGOs' activities and basically taking undue advantage of the population. Right. But at the same time, it places a greater regulatory burden, a compliance burden on the NGOs. All the NGOs now will have to hire a few people just to keep track of these regulations if they are having the foreign contributions. Particularly when we talk about many of the missionary NGOs, etc., they they are dependent on foreign contribution, so they will be absolutely dependent on this compliance burden. Now, in NGOs, there was a term key functionary, which generally would be the office bearers or the head of the directors of the NGO. Now, that has been expanded. Now, it will include the trustees, the partners, governing body members, heads of the Hindu undivided families or the kartas, as they are referred to as, and individuals exercising managerial control over the organization. All of them are included in the key functionary for greater accountability. Okay, for greater accountability. The penalties have been made much more stringent. So, violations, if you have excessive administrative expenditure from the foreign contribution, violation. Speculative investment that you are doing, violation. Misuse of foreign funds, unauthorized receipt or utilization of foreign contributions. That is, rather than these subsegments, you are using it for somewhere else. Use of funds for unapproved purposes in other geographical location that we have talked about. Penalty up to 30% of the amount misused or rupees 1 lakh, whichever is higher. Similar penalties when funds are used for other geographical jurisdiction. So up to 30% penalty or 1 lakh, right? Whichever is higher. So for your exam, this is all that you need to know. What are the changes in the FCRA norms? You will definitely have an editorial piece regarding it. At least 2 or 3 editorial pieces regarding this are to be expected tomorrow and day after tomorrow. So that is why we will not prolong this discussion. You will have the discussion thereafter. Coming to the next article, India's patchy industrial climate strategy. Article relevant for your GS paper 3. Now, what is this article about? This tells us that when we talk about emissions, right? Now, India has got substantial amount of emissions. We are one of the largest emission centers across the world, isn't it? Per capita emission level is low. But when we talk about the overall emissions, we are amongst the top 3 emitters across the world. Now, India basically aims for net zero emission by 2070. Emission by 2070. What is the meaning of net zero emission by 2070? That our overall emission levels will be low, substantially low. right? Also, whatever we are emitting, we are able to capture that also. So when can you have net zero? You can have net zero when your overall emission levels are also low. You have to lower your emissions. There is no negotiation in that, right? No second opinion regarding that. And we aim for a developed status by 2047 as well. Now, in our biennial transparency report, BTR1, the first transparency report that we have submitted as per the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. As per that, in 2022, right, over 20% of our emissions, overall emissions, came from industrial sector, industries. Okay. So this is a major sector which is generating lot of these emissions. Now, out of this overall emissions carried out by industries, now we have brought about programs like PAT, that is perform, achieve, trade. We will talk about it briefly as well for those industries. Now, out of these industries, 55% is coming from the established industries like manufacturing, construction, etc. Okay. And 40% is actually coming from non-specific industry. What do we mean by non-specific industry? Does that mean an industry which today is manufacturing a bat and tomorrow is manufacturing a nuclear warhead? No. It basically refers to those small and medium scale industries which are not properly scrutinized, right? They also end up emitting. So they contribute almost 40% of the emissions. So we have to ensure that our overall parameters to control the industrial emissions that targets even the small sector industries and the medium scale industries. Only then will a country of 1.4, 1.5 billion be able to reduce the overall emission levels, because with increase in economic growth our manufacturing sector emissions will grow. That is the global trend. That is something that India has been following as well. So let us contextualize it. So India's first BTR, that is the biennial transparency report submitted to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now this is the biennial transparency report is a requirement as per the Paris Agreement. As per Paris Agreement. Right. Global stocktake, biennial transparency report, etc. They are very much required. So more than 20% of India's total greenhouse gas emissions originate from industrial sector. Manufacturing fuel consumption contributes around 13% of the total emissions. Industrial processes and product use contribute another 9%. Substantial amount of emissions come from these areas. Now, we have some of the existing decarbonization systems in our country. What do we mean by decarbonization? The initiatives which are supposed to reduce the amount of emission. One is the case of the perform, achieve, trade. It has been running for a long period of time, right? But it focuses on major industries: cement, steel, fertilizer, aluminium, petrochemicals, textile, pulp, paper. These industries, the major industries, small sector industries, are ignored. And this is a new one. That is the carbon credit trading scheme. This is the market mechanism which is being introduced. But also important for your examination to know what is perform achieve trade. So when we say perform achieve trade, it was launched way back in 2012. And it was basically a sub part of the larger National Action Plan for Climate Change. National Action Plan for Climate Change. Okay. Now it basically got eight subparts: secure Himalayas, sustainable agriculture. All of these were part of National Action Plan on Climate Change. Under this, one of the programs was National Mission, National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Okay. Now, this was basically to reduce the overall emissions. That is where perform achieve trade, and this was monitored by Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Now what is done in this? Let's suppose you have two companies, A and B. Now when you both A and B, one is in steel sector, let's suppose B is in cement sector. Both of them are emission intensive. Now both will be given certain targets, certain targets. These are your emission targets. You have to meet these targets. Let's suppose A manages to overachieve. A emits only this much. Okay. So it had a target, let's assume, of 5 gigatons of carbon or greenhouse gas. It has emitted only 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, for the 2 gigatons, it would be provided with the energy saving certificate, ES certs or E certs. Now, let's suppose the company B, which is operating the cement industry, now it has a target of 3 gigatons. It has actually produced or emitted 4 gigatons, surpassed the target by 1 gigaton. Now, for B, it is mandatory that basically you have surpassed your target by 1 gigaton. So, for this 1 gigaton, you will has to buy the e-certs. That is mandatory. So that is why when we say this perform achieve trade, so B has to invest money in order to buy these energy certificates. So next time B will try to emit less so that that money is not spent. So over a period of time, what is it doing? Over a period of time, it will basically reduce the emission level from the industry. That is the aim of perform achieve trade. Okay, so that is the perform achieve trade, and this has been in existence for a long time. Now the country has been transitioning to the carbon credit trading scheme. Okay, so that is basically to reduce emission intensity of the GDP. As per the nationally determined contribution, we have basically had an aim for 2030 also, 2035 also, to reduce the emission intensity of GDP. So that is by creating carbon credits. So this is almost like carbon credits. Perform achieve trade, an older version. CCTS is a newer version. Okay. Now, the issues with this: about 55% of the industrial emissions come from these explicitly identified sectors like cement, paper pulp, aluminium, refinery, etc. But 40% from non specific industries. And why does that pose a problem? Because subsectoral classification is not there. And many of these industries, they fall outside the direct scope of both PAT as well as CCTS. They are not subject to sector specific energy efficiency targets. For example, let's suppose the case of steel sector has got this target. A small sector industry is free from that target, so it can operate inefficiently as well. Escape focused regulatory attention despite the amount of emissions that they carry out. So, what is the way forward in this? I will tell you a couple of them. You let me know what are the other way forwards. One is to increase the transparency about the emission norms. This is where, when we talk about the agencies, the regulators, right? So these regulators, they need to be very clear and they need to fix that guideline and ensure that every company basically fulfills that or publishes that. So transparency is required. Okay, better monitoring and transparency. What are the other ways to solve this issue of emission by these small scale industries without impacting the jobs that they provide? Let us know in the comment section. Then, couple of articles relevant for prelims. El Nino, 111 districts in 12 states are of primary concern. Now, we are in the Kharif sowing season. Okay. Now, in the Kharif sowing season, the overall acreage, that is the area under which you will have the sowing for the Kharif crops like paddy, cotton, sugarcane, all of these, right? That acreage is under stress. It has reduced because we are going to face, and we are already facing, water scarcity. Multiple parts of the country are facing water scarcity. By the way, how many of us are aware that water scarcity or the reduced amount of rainfall this time in the monsoon right now is not only impacted by El Nino, but is also impacted by something known as the cold blob, the Atlantic cold blob. We will be having a detailed discussion regarding that, and we will have a kind of a YouTube video or a shorts regarding that. There is a connect between the melting of the Arctic ice and the impact on Indian monsoon, the new study has revealed. We will discuss that separately. But this is a super El Nino year, and as a consequence of that, we basically are expecting lower rainfall. Already the monsoon is betraying the expectation, and we are experiencing little to no rainfall in many parts of the country. So till now, you can imagine that we have 43% deficiency in the amount of rainfall. Okay, 43% deficiency already exists. So, in order to ensure that the Kharif season goes well, because Rabi season will be taken care of, it is the Kharif season which will be impacted. Rabi, dependent on western disturbances in many of the cases, and some winter rainfall by retreating monsoon. But this is the where Kharif is where major bulk of the food grains are produced. Now, President has presented the second set of Padma Awards. So, to various different eminent personalities, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan, and Padma Shri. The three categories, the highest civilian awards in the country, were provided. So, you basically had tennis legend Vijay Amritraj to the actors and the celebrities like Mammootty, Madhavan, and even the cricketer Rohit Sharma. They were provided with these Padma Awards. This you can browse through for your prelims perspective. So basically, Supreme Court Judge K.T. Thomas was provided with Padma Vibhushan. Along with that, P. Narayanan, an eminent Malayalam journalist, was also provided with this Padma Vibhushan. Whereas you had Alka Yagnik, the playback singer, Mammootty, the American oncologist, that is Dattatreyu Nori, Vijay Amritraj, SKM, the industrialist, all of these were basically provided with the Padma Bhushan. Okay. And like that, you had these award ceremonies which were done. The basic ones you can browse through. Okay. Yes. Now, after this, couple of articles relevant for your from PIB. This has also appeared in the Hindu as by the way. Many of the articles that we have discussed today, they have appeared in the PIB as well, but we have separated those articles so that there is no repetition. India's critical minerals gains momentum. 56 critical mineral blocks and 11 exploration license blocks have been successfully auctioned. So basically, mineral blocks, 10 critical and strategic mineral blocks, and also the overall case of rare earth elements, graphite, vanadium, titanium, glauconite, rock phosphate, and associated minerals have been auctioned under the provisions of Mines and Minerals Act 1957 and the Minerals Auction Rules 2015. Now, this is done in order to ensure improved availability of critical minerals, we have also got the increased utilization of these critical minerals. So that is where it is as a part of the National Critical Minerals Mission to promote private sector partnership, reducing import dependence, and creating a robust supply chain network of critical minerals. So, what is the National Critical Minerals Mission? So, first of all, it has got seven sub aims: increasing domestic critical minerals production, acquisition of critical minerals and assets abroad. This is where you have a special purpose vehicle that has been created, that is Kabil. Kabil has been created for this purpose. Which are the PSUs which are involved in the formation of Kabil? Let me know. Recycling of critical minerals, trade and markets for critical minerals, scientific research and technological advancement associated with the application of critical minerals, human resource development for skilling, and developing effective funding, financing, and the fiscal initiative. So these are the critical minerals, national critical minerals missions subcomponents. Okay. Now, then VO Chidambarar Port emerges as a model for green maritime growth with 45% reduction in carbon emission. Okay, so VO Chidambarar Port is one of the southernmost ports of our country. It is a major port, also the Tuticorin port. So here, basically, this is the port authority. Now, overall, when we talk about the emissions, port sector is also an emission intensive sector, because various port operations, from logistics to unloading to offloading, there is a huge amount of carbon emission which is done. That is where the green fuel, green technology is very important to be implemented. So here the IIM Calcutta has presented a case study, the hydrogen pivot, orchestrating the green transition at the VO Chidamnar port. Okay, so basically, this is where the infrastructure has been developed to reduce the net carbon emissions by 45%. You need to know the location of VO Chidamnar port. If you can take a look at the background image, this is where it is situated. It is almost the southernmost port of India. It also lies at 8-degree latitude, but the case of Virinium port, it also lies at 8-degree latitude. Virinium port is slightly to the south of the VO Chidambanar port. Okay, it is on the eastern coast, so that location becomes important. Now, Indian Navy's Eastern Fleet ships Udaygiri and Kavaratti, they have visited Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. So that is during their operational deployment that they have basically visited that. It is a part of the enhanced comprehensive strategic partnership that was arrived at with the defense minister's visit to Vietnam. And that is where India and Vietnam are seeking to deepen the maritime relations as well. Okay, so both Udaygiri and Kavarati, they are basically the fleet ships and the support ships as well. That brings us to the end of the discussion for the day. If you have liked the session, don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. And till we meet again, do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.